Okay, at this point, I have absolutely no idea what I should do with the Osaka Syndrome YouTube channel as of this time. Those of you who have been keeping up with it can probably tell that content generally just hasn't been released, and that's because I've generally not had ideas. Like, if I had ideas for things to create, I would easily be creating things. The issue with that channel has always been that the longer it's existed, the more efficient my output has become. And so the more content that I've made, the easier it's been for me to create more of it. And the natural result of that for me would be to run through absolutely every single idea that I had, um, without, spreading them out to reach, like a more, what do you call it? Like, what do you call it? It feels like it's been a long time since I've attempted anything like this. Generally, I haven't been making videos because there have been no ideas to make videos. And previously, when I was making videos more often, it was just kind of finding, 100 different ways to essentially arrive at the same conclusion, which is that I am in a dark room and people are who are also in a dark room can sort of hear their lifestyle or a similar lifestyle elucidated, in a way that makes sense to them and makes them feel less alone. And I can break down the sort of nuances of how I came to that place, or why I think I'm there, or how I feel about it. The consequence of this, of course, was that as I made so many of these videos, and as I was in my room so long, living in 2x speed, so to speak, with so much time to myself to reflect on things, and to engage with different perspectives, my view of reality was further and further strained because I was not really engaging with reality. And what I mean when I say this is that I was able to apply narratives to myself that if I saw myself engaging in the real world, I wouldn't have been able to apply. I think the clearest example of this is when I ran away from home last year, to briefly live with a friend of mine with whom I had been basically unable to speak throughout the duration of my stay. I continued and continued to try, but my words would come out awkward and stilted, or unable to be there at times because my mind would literally go blank due to all of the external stimuli in front of me. Um, and that was difficult. That was a difficult thing to go through. Um, at the end of the day, I really appreciated the fact that that friend took me in and allowed me to be there, because it allowed me to put pressure on my household, or not even put pressure, but like, um, you know, make it known how important of an issue the gender stuff is, and how much it affects me to not be able to present myself in that way, a way that I'm actually not presenting myself in this YouTube video. I suppose I could like start speaking like this, but I I don't know. Do people on YouTube like are they going to like react weird to me like suddenly speaking like this in a YouTube video? I have no idea. Um, just that's not even like the best voice that I can put on. Um, but it's weird. Like whenever I try to record videos now, and I speak in the voice that I almost always tend to speak to people, and um, there's something strange and stilted about it, almost as if I associate presenting myself into a camera with an inherently more, masculine affectation that I'm presenting. Like, I mean, the way I'm talking right now is not even a natural way for me to speak. Like before I started training my voice, like the way I'm talking right now is strange. It's very strange to me, but it's the way that I've spoken in other videos. It's the way that I've spoken in presentations. Um, and so I think there's a certain performative element to making videos that um, I've engaged with for so long, that has, my brain has this sort of innate training to present myself in a way that I understand how to present or how to translate into content. Whereas my genuine self, the person who I present in my interactions and do so seamlessly without any real effort, the vocabulary I use, the tone of my voice, the way in which I engage with people, it's very, very, very different than the way in which I engage with these YouTube videos. Um, and it generally makes me feel a lot more comfortable to engage in that way. Whereas this way doesn't really. And you can sort of see why there's less content if you think of it in that sense. But I'm getting a bit off topic here. Um, to my previous point, basically, like, I was able to form these narratives about myself because it had been so long in my room that I began losing um, credibility with like material things. I was like entirely off into like the metaphysical landscape, um, and so once I was met with that material reality, with like how I am confronted with like social interactions or just like real world phenomena, engaging with objects in a space in front of other people or just, in everyday situations. I found this awkwardness and discomfort at incredible levels. Um, Levels that like, you know, made me appear nearly completely inebriated by you know, any like standard metric. There were a lot of moments when I did or said, fairly strange things just because I had no idea what to say. The being around all of that stimuli at once was so overstimulating that like the only real response I had to my anxiety in those moments um, was to perform in a way in which I felt I was being watched at every corner, and that it was causing me not to be able to think. Um, Usually when you feel like you're conscious of having to perform around other people, having to think about the things that you're saying, it's going to come out wrong and stilted because you're not supposed to be thinking about the things that you're saying. You're supposed to be, I keep saying engaging. I don't know why I'm saying that so much today. You're supposed to be engaging with it in a natural manner. Um, but I wasn't doing that. And I think this is what allowed me to, come to conclusions about myself that were far removed from reality. I was able to, on the one hand, say that, oh yeah, I have no trouble in the real world. I have no social anxiety. Totally a-okay, I'll be totally fine. Then I go into the real world, it turns out I have extreme social anxiety. And at the same time, I was also able to say, oh yeah, I just want to be in my room forever. I'm just like forever sad, but at least in here I'll be fine. I can get some happiness in here. I don't want to be anywhere else, etc., etc., etc. Which was all just cope. I mean, you have videos like my Why I'll Never Get Married video where I essentially say, oh yeah, I would never want love or romance because it's just like it's just like a waste of time or whatever that like only leaves with you being hurt or something like that. Clearly trying to cope with things that I wanted. I wanted to be out of my room on some level. I very much wanted to connect with another person on that level. But these were things that I was not allowing myself to have because being in my room was more of a it was more of a safe option. And at the very least, when it came to like the years previously, when it was, easier to do all of this, on some level, some of those arguments I was making was true. Now, a lot of the details, looking back, don't make sense, and were just justifications for whatever was going on at the time. Um, but I did genuinely enjoy being, locked away in my room for a while. The year of 2019, as bad as it was in certain moments, had incredibly comfy moments of me just, playing CS, listening to videos, or like laying in my bed on my laptop watching videos. Um, you know, I had my PS2 out here and I was, on that monitor right there. Yeah, I was just playing games and like there was just trash everywhere in my room. It was like everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. It was like totally cluttered. And it felt like I lived in my own little world. Um, and looking back, I see those things as fond memories. Would I enjoy doing that now? No. Do I enjoy doing that now? No. Um, and it's because I've been here so long that I can't enjoy it anymore. I want other things. I want to do other things. Um, when it came to what do you call it? This is a really old style Osaka syndrome video. I haven't made anything like this in so long. Um, but yeah, like when I don't remember what I was gonna say, but when it was 2020, like when 2020 was hitting, like my like goal for the year was this is gonna be, the year I see friends of mine. This is gonna be the year that I go out and do things. After all this time, because at that point, from like 2016, like summer of 2016 or whenever school stopped, um, that was the year that I had become homeschooled for eighth grade year. Should have been in ninth, but I was held back and stuff. So I was homeschooled that year, and then briefly the year after, during the next school year, I went to school for a few months, and then I had dropped out essentially, and I didn't go back until 2019. So that was 2017 that happened, I think. Yeah, yeah. So that was 2017, and then it wasn't until 2019 that I went back for a few months again, and then left. And now I'm here. And so I was never really able to make it through, and now I'm just sort of around. But beyond those like brief periods of time in which I was in education and then went out, or like in 2018 when I was moving around the country into like 5 different states, um, periods of time in which I was either forced to be out in the real world or needed there because of the necessity of like the economic pressure that I was under and the things that were going on, etc. Um, those are periods of time that are like exceptions to the rule. Generally, like the main trend throughout my time in these last 4, almost 5 years has been in my room. That's the connecting through line of all of this, and you wonder why it's such a consistent theme in my videos. Um, and so I had basically had enough by the time 2020 came around. It was like, okay, it's January, we got a new year. I'll be 18 in April at the time. Geez, it's only like, I think it's only like, yeah, 2 months. It's only 2 months until I turn 19. That's weird to think about. Next year I'll be 20. It's very weird for me to think about. But like So in 2020, I was like, yeah, I'll turn 18 this year. And my thought was, well, now I can get on a bus and just go see whoever I want to see. I can meet them and say hello and all of this. And COVID happened. The COVID, shows up in like Wuhan in like December or whatever it was. It's like in America by January, and then it just massively spreads everywhere. And I had been saying from the beginning that it was going to come over here, and that, given the nature of like the current ecological um, track that we're on, with further like deforestation and all this shit that's going on. Of course, you were going to end up with new viruses or like things like treatment resistant bacteria, which is a different thing, but like yeah, like there there's pretty clear correlation between like the climate change and like the growing ecological destruction that's been occurring, and the introduction of new diseases and pandemics. And when this COVID thing happened, I was kind of like nonchalant about it on some level, because my general expectation with things is that things never really change that fundamentally. Like, they tend to remain the same. I mean, that's what I said when the Capitol riot stuff was going on. Of course, nothing's going to happen out of this. It was, by like a thin hair that nothing happened, but it was my general um, instinct is to say that things will mostly remain the same and never really change that much. Um, but this was, I had some different feelings about this just from looking at it. And I thought, it would get over here and become a pandemic if it's a pandemic over there. Um, and then it did. And it was like everybody I was speaking to at the time was like, no, pandemics only happen in third world countries. It could never come over here. And I, I don't know. It was, but yeah, I like, basically by the time I was 18, I couldn't, I couldn't leave. I couldn't go anywhere. Even though I, now had the ability to. So it was like, shit, this whole year, like I had this whole year like planned out. This is gonna be the year that I get out of the room, because by that point I was getting more and more sick of being in the room. You look at the videos I was making in 2020, a lot of them just feel like me trying to, what do you call it? Like bide my time, Like it's me trying to distract myself. I come up with these like insane narratives to myself that I personally believe but aren't true. Um, and I'm just like making different iterations of the same ideas, trying to speak about things, trying to like sift through old stories I have, whatever I can say, anything I can say at any time. Um, so there's content, so I can make content, so I can speak. And looking back, I mean, I guess that was neat, but the place that it was coming from wasn't very good. I made some of my best videos in 2018, or 2018, in 2020. Um, and I'm glad that happened, but the like um emotional and physiological toll that ultimately took on me, or I guess I should say, the emotional and physiological toll that some of my decisions as a result of having to be locked away like that took on me, I don't know if they were worth it. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment. But at that time, it had been 4 years, you know, 4 years of doing that. It's like you see all of these people who they they shoot themselves after like a few months of COVID lockdown. And I was there, having to deal with COVID lockdown, and post COVID lockdown where you still couldn't leave your house. Um, you know, what do you call it? Uh, like after building up all of this momentum of like, this is going to be the year I go see people, it turned out to not be that. Um, and as I was stuck in my house, I moved towards this tendency to like drink more and more, for example, um, or just alter, be in altered states more generally. Um, and I'm very, very glad that I quit last year. Everything entirely. Um, basically at the end of the year, I was like, this is not good, and then I stopped. Um, I think it was like December. Yeah, it was December. December was when I had quit. And I haven't had any desire to go back, and not any real desire at least. I tried to drink again like one time. I was like, oh, it's a special occasion, I'll try it again. And I literally didn't like it. I was like, this is bad. Why did I ever enjoy this? Um, and it just wasn't fun. And in retrospect now, I don't think I would enjoy most drugs anymore. They just make me tired, like reduced energy levels, reduced like ability to focus. I don't think I would enjoy them now, for the most part. I mean, there are cool things like if you take like the like classical psychedelics, for example, DMT, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin. Like there are very positive things that those can do, not just in terms of like people's subjective experiences, but empirically verifiable things as well, like neurogenesis in the hippocampus and such. There's papers on like DMT usage that have found that you have a much better like memory, for example. Um, and so I like in other papers, kind of talking about, oh well, maybe that's one of the reasons why these have found to be, good treatments for depression and things like addiction is because um, the the neurogenesis and like increased cell proliferation um, are could serve as something that like uh, ameliorates the like loss of volume that's caused by depression, sometimes termed pseudo dementia because of the like brain damage that depression can cause. But I digress. Basically, like it would be interesting to try things like that, far off into the future. Like I've tripped before, but it was never positive. Um, but I have no real interest in anything like that at this point. It sounds like dogs are very angry in the other room. I think I should probably go check on that. Okay, now that I have checked on that, it was just sort of them routinely fighting one another. This seems to be something that runs in the family. Like my dog, who accidentally had these dogs with his sister. Both of them. Oh, okay, his sister came from a different batch from their mother, right? And I remember like distinctly like both of those batches fought all the time. This seems to be just something that like dogs and like puppies do, but it's concerning for me because I don't like hearing that the dogs are potentially in pain. I've sort of just learned to like, okay, they fight, then they bark. That's a thing that they do. But when I heard sounds like towards the end of that clip, I was like, oh geez, I need to go do something. Um, but they seem to be okay. It's just sort of the routine things that they tend to do. I don't really remember what I was. Oh yeah, okay. Um, so basically, I I have no real interest in trying these things anymore. And looking back, um, how excited I was just over the existence of them. Partly it was due to all of the things that I was reading about them, and I still derive a lot of enjoyment out of reading about the subject of like pharmacology and like the nowadays more so like the neuroscience like aspects of how drugs interact with you. I find that all really interesting. And just reading people's personal experiences. I mean, that's how all of this stuff really started. And I wanted to learn more and more until progressively I got into things that were more complicated that I don't really understand, but I don't really care that I don't understand them that well because reading about them is just fun for me. Um, but yeah, like I find the topic super interesting. And when I was trying like a lot of these more obscure like research chemicals, for example, the act of trying them, a large part of the excitement was like, okay, I'm going to take this dose and then gradually move my way up and then write down what effects it has on me. So, I take like, let's say you put like 1 milligram amount or like half of that like under your tongue, as an allergy test or something. You wait like an hour and a half. Okay, we're good. And then you just like gradually, like depending on whatever it is, like let's say you move up like 4 and then like an extra 5 after a certain amount of time and then 5 and 5 and then 10 like and then you go up like that and then write down your subjective experiences and then compare that to other ones you've had with similar drugs and the experiences of others. I find that really interesting. But that's a particularly scientific, or I guess scientific in quotations, way of going about it that I did a few times. But more so, I was just sort of doing things that were pleasurable. I'm not going to sit here and be one of these people like I'm a researcher. I I engage in scientific research. No, I was using drugs. Um, it's just that like the curiosity of being a human experiment um, was very enticing for me, and the act of like um, gaining that information and then contrasting it with other information was also very exciting. And so the act, like the reading component was far more important to me than the consumption component. But the consumption component, took up more and more of my time as I needed more and more ways to alter the way I was perceiving my environment because I couldn't change my environment. I could not go out to see people. Um, and so if I can't change my environment, the only thing I can really do is just alter the way in which I'm experiencing it. Whether that be through like something like dissociative, which would make it to where, like when I had experiences on 3-MeO PCP, for example, allegedly, um, it would feel as though like my body literally didn't exist. I would feel like the teeth in my mouth and it felt like they weren't attached to anything. And when I would play a video game, it was sort of like I was like in that video game. Like I would look at things around me and like I would be so immersed into the act of whatever I was doing that it was just amazing. And to this day, that's probably still like my favorite drug. But I haven't had it in since like November. I think it's actually before that. Yeah, no, I think it was November. I think that was the last time, like early November, when I started um like waning down on a lot of this stuff and I was like, okay, I think I need to stop. And then in like late November, early December, I just stopped. But um and then I think it was alcohol I stopped on December 15th. Yes, yeah, it was December 15th. So it was alcohol I stopped the latest. All of the other stuff I quit like earlier on, I think. Um, but but yeah, basically like, and I was never using 3-MeO PCP that often because the magic of it goes away if you use it, you know, particularly like regularly. There would be like a week span where I might have used it every day, but then after that week or 2 weeks, it would be like, okay, now we're gonna have 2 months not using it, you know. Um, and so I was generally pretty careful about that. It was only really like my alcohol consumption that got out of hand. Um, not in terms of like me literally being unable to control myself. I was always choosing to do it, just as I chose not to do it and stopped, immediately. Um, it was like I was just drinking all the time. Like I would often drink like right when I woke up. I would be drinking before I would go to bed. I would be drinking like in the middle of the day. It was really nuts. I would just be in calls with people, and because I was around people, I would want to start drinking a whole lot. And I ended up concerning quite a few people, I think. It was just the thing I was doing. I'm the kind of person who, if you tell me not to do stuff like this, it's never really going to work. There's no real amount of deterrence that you can give me to make me not make those decisions. I have to come to that conclusion myself. And thankfully I have, and I'm getting myself on a better track now. But I had to make those mistakes myself, regardless of how many warnings I received. Um, but yeah, like I, even though like everything else, I think I was generally pretty responsible about, despite the fact that I had moments where I did things that were quite risky, like having edible cannabis with like I think it was like 25% or like a quarter of a bottle of vodka that I had, and then I put like 10 milligrams of like 3-MeO PCP like under my tongue, and then like 5 or like 7 through my nose or something, and then like 10 or 15 orally or something like that. Like it was some like insane amount. And then I got this like really intense tachycardia where I think it was like my heart rate was like 165 beats per minute, which I mean, looking back, those are kind of baby numbers. I've had it go up to like 100 and like 85, like 190. Um, and so, but it was really, really scary. Like it was very physically uncomfortable. And it was when I did that, it was like I just wanted to kill myself like really badly. And looking back, like it's like my drug use was simultaneously the way I was keeping myself alive, because it was like 4 years of being trapped in my room. I want to get the fuck out of here. I want to go see friends. I want to go outside. And I'm just trapped here because of COVID, and I can't make the decision on that. And then on the other hand, it's like in moments where I really, really wanted to end my life, I would do things that were kind of risky that I shouldn't have done. Now, those are only like key instances. Like one point where, I weighed like 110 pounds, which is, for those of you who are in countries that don't exist, like 50 kilograms about, thereabouts. I don't want to do math right now. Um, but like, yeah, I was like 110 pounds, like 50 kg. I think I might have been like 49 or 48 kg. It doesn't matter. But like, I I was very small basically. Um, and I had taken like 60 like milligrams of like 5 APB and then 60 milligrams of 6 APB, which 6 APB is basically like dose like 1 milligram like per pound thereabouts. It's not a science, it's not known for sure, but that's user reports have kind of estimated that. I've taken like doses of like 140 before, I think 130 around there. Um, I think the first time I took it, I did about that amount. Um, oh geez, that was all the way back in like March of 2020, first time I did that. But yeah, like basically, I did this amount, and with 5 APB, I think it's like much less that you can take. Like I think instead of saying, and this is just conjecture, like I don't remember this for sure, don't use this as advice. I think it's more like 3 milligrams per pound or something like that. I don't know. It basically it's more potent, and I took them together. Um, when I was very small, and it would have already been pushing it, like given the fact that like I had very little to no physical activity, like the amount of like what do you call it, like energy that drug like requires you to exert, probably because it's such a potent like 5HT2A agonist. Like it's like the benzofurans, like that whole class of drugs, 5-MAPB, 6-APB, 5-APB, like they're some of the most potent 5-HT2A agonists there are. And drugs that have that sort of affinity are very bad for your heart. It's like it's pretty dangerous stuff. Like, as you consider like if you microdose like every day for like years, or like even just a year, like you risk like a very you hold a very heavy risk of like developing heart valve issues and stuff. And yeah, so it's something that should not be taken lightly. Used like once or twice, maybe 3 times in a year. I mean, really, like, don't use any drugs if you can help it. I always say, don't use drugs if you can, if you can choose not to use drugs, don't do it. But if you're going to, then do it safely. But I always absolutely do not. If you have the choice not to try them, do not try them. But I don't, like, from my like conjecture like standpoint, I don't think it would cause that much harm if you only used it like a few times like ever, or just like once. Um, Regardless though, it is quite a, serious compound. Um, and so I took this amount because I was very, very suicidal, and I was like, well, if I just die, I just die. Um, and I I had to focus on talking, because if I like drifted off and like looked into space and not talked for a while, I literally like would like feel my breathing like not being able to breathe as well as I normally could, and I would feel like dizzy, and like very like my focus would go into my body, where like I could tell that like my heart was like racing and beating very, very, very hard, um, to the point where like I would get dizzy when I wasn't focused on talking. Um, so like I had to focus on talking, or else I would just go into like a paranoid, anxious spiral, um, where that energy would be focused in like surviving, because my body was freaking out. I was able to distract myself like that because you get so intensely focused on whatever you're doing or saying that like it kind of blocks out everything else. And simultaneously as this was happening, I was also like experiencing insane euphoria, like physically, or not that much physically. I never really got too much physical euphoria from it, but like psychologically, like from hearing music, from talking, like I felt like on top of the world, amazing. But in terms of like physically the state that my body was in, or like that my head would be in if I wasn't focused on talking, it was like really scary. Um, Looking back, I probably shouldn't have done that. I don't think I would say I regretted it, because the conversations that I had as a result of doing that were very, very meaningful, and allowed me to get over some long-lasting psychological problems that used to be very like detrimental to my health. And the fear that I associated with those things that I ultimately talked about was completely eliminated, and now it, when they come up in my mind, they're just like any other thing. They don't hold any real, what do you call it, like bearing over my general consciousness, be it subconscious or conscious. And I would assume that this is because the those two drugs that I mentioned are like MDA analogs. That like the way that they work is pretty similar to ecstasy, which has what do you call it, like fear extinction learning, because of the like the B or what is it, BDNF, yeah, BDNF dependent mechanisms that like basically like that like induce this very, very fast like learning from just like hyper stimulating your like amygdala and like prefrontal cortex and shit. Um, I don't remember all of the information offhand, but basically it's like in the clinical trials they've done of people with PTSD, they, you know, it's basically it's supposed that that's most likely the reason why they've had such good results with this drug versus like, you know, other things that they've trialed, you know, much more immediate results because of the fear extinction learning that occurs. And I think that's what happened with me in that instance. So ultimately, like, I wouldn't take the experience back because every other time I had rolled on those substances or the combination of the two, I never had a high enough amount that would make me talk about those things. I always still controlled myself, and it's not like I wasn't in control of everything I was saying. I just didn't care, and so I said them. But every other roll I had, I cared. And so I don't know if it's because I took that high amount that I didn't care and that I was able to talk about them. But the fact that I was able to talk about them, you know, allowed me to get through these things that I really needed to get through. Um, and so, however not recommended and however dangerous that was, it was beneficial to me personally in an immediate psychological sense. Physically, I wonder what effects that will have on me in the future. I have no idea. I got like an EKG done and a bunch of blood tests, and the doctors seem to say that I'm in perfect health. Hopefully it stays that way. I don't intend on doing anything that's bad for my body in the future. At least not significantly so. Psychedelics have an effect, but it's really like only meaningful if you use them very regularly, from my understanding. Back to that 5-HT2A agonism thing. Um, but yeah, like I I kind of forget the point I was gonna make here. I think I got off onto like a long tangent. Um, oh yeah, okay. So yeah, like it was the use was simultaneously a way of harming myself and of self-medicating. And when I got on HRT, it was like, well, I don't the the psychological like stressors that are there that I should just kill myself because I'm not a girl and I see no hope in sight of being one anytime soon. Those weren't there, and it was closer in view seeing friends of mine. The relationship that I developed with someone who means the world to me was also you know um, something that only continued to grow and get better. And so like what has it been, like almost like 8 months now we've been together, something like that. Maybe I think it's 7 now, but yeah, it's like something like that. um um and so like yeah, like things have just gotten a lot better for me. So there's no, like, the need that I had to do those things isn't really there anymore. And it's not like I'm constantly being Um, I was about to say assuaged. I don't think that's the right word there. Assaulted, that's what I meant. I'm not constantly being assaulted by the loneliness that I was experiencing at the time and the hopelessness of everything, because it was like, oh look, my hair is falling out, I don't look feminine in these ways. When am I gonna get on it? Is it gonna take like multiple years for me to get on it? Why don't I just kill myself? I mean, I had already had like long lasting, consistent suicidal thoughts for like years and years from not being a girl. Um, but it's like it was only worsening. Um, the whole reason I came out was because I couldn't last any longer. I was just going to die if I had to stay in the closet any longer. Um, it was too serious of a thing. Otherwise, I would have just kept suppressing myself. I would have chose to keep suppressing myself if I had the option. I didn't have the option. Um, and I also found out that, like, once I started wearing the kind of clothes that I want to wear, speaking the kind of way that's natural for me to speak, using the body language that I used when I was in school that I always got made fun of for being girly for using. Um, when I expressed things about myself that I had been actively like hiding or obfuscating, um, when I like was able to be honest like that, I found out that like it wasn't just a matter of this is a thing that I need to do to not kill myself. It was also like this is a thing that makes me immensely happy. Like this is a thing that like literally like makes me feel like a child when I do it in like the most like positive sense. Um, it like brings me back to those sort of naive times of when things were pure, and I think that's what happiness really is, right? It's kind of disconnecting yourself from like um, all of these like cynical um, and what do you call it? Cynical and like adult ways of going about things, and just purely enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. Um, I like tapping into that your inner child. It's a really meaningful thing, and it feels like I do when like when I wear dresses and skirts and I present myself this way. It's like this is a thing I've wanted to do for so long that I'm finally doing. And it's not just that it brings me comfort or keeps me from killing myself, it's also like it makes me immensely happy to do that. So initially it was like I had to come out because otherwise, it would be bye bye, bye bye, Um, I wouldn't be there anymore. But then like as I started transitioning more so like socially, and then now like I'm on the medical transition and all of this, I I found out that it was more than that. That I'm not just experiencing severe gender dysphoria, I'm experiencing extreme gender euphoria. And I think the euphoria I receive from that is an even bigger sign that I'm trans, and an even bigger indictment on the justifications that I used to make to say that I wasn't trans. I'm not trans for the first time on YouTube, even though a lot of people seem to act like I am. Um, if you go back to a lot of my 2018 videos, I openly refer to myself as she. Um, I think in some of my 2017 videos I do too. Um, yeah, I openly refer to myself that way, and I like, yeah, it's just a thing. But then at some point I make this video where I'm like, I'm not trans because I just want to be like a woman socially, and it makes me like happy to like socially like be perceived as that, which means I'm not trans. Which is like beyond like bizarre like levels of like self-delusion. It's like saying, "Oh, I enjoy this thing and want to do it," which means I actually don't like it. And I think there was some level of lying to myself with that as well, or just beyond what I just said. I think there were other things that I said that just like blatantly weren't true. Um, but I tried to suppress it to my best ability. There was a live stream I did in like either it was very very early 2020 or like very late 2019. No, it was very early 2020, like January, February type stuff, I think. Um, where I was just crying, like drinking like massive amounts of alcohol and just crying about I would like never be a girl. Um, the amount of pain I've gotten from this stuff I think is pretty clear and well documented. I don't know why I'm presenting this like I have to prove it to you, because I don't have to prove anything to anyone. Um, but that's one of the other things that I've gotten a lot better about, is that I don't need anybody else's approval to do things that make me happy. I only need my own, and, you know, people who are very, very close to me, depending on what the issue is. If it's not like a fundamental principle matter, something that can't be compromised on, which, knowing myself, I can compromise on most things, unless it like is like me compromising on some like fundamental moral principle that I hold, in regards to others, or like the treatment of the individuals in question, with whom I am making the compromise with. Um, but regardless of that, I don't actually know what point I was going to make. I feel like I keep making a lot of disparate but vaguely interconnected points, and I don't quite know where I've been going with this YouTube video. Um, I think I'm trying to say that I want to get out of my room. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, one of the big reasons I was in my room for so long is because gender dysphoria made it to where I was, I was presenting myself in an inherently dishonest manner, by like having to recognize that, like, people are seeing this face, they're seeing this hair, they're seeing these clothes, they're hearing the sound of my voice, they're hearing the vocabulary that I'm using, the way that I'm using it. Um, this is all wrong. The way in which they're responding to the things that I say, it's all wrong. The social role I'm taking up, uh, many of like many of the ways in which people respond to these roles are like subconsciously assigned. So if you take up the role of a woman and you're, presenting yourself in that manner, subconsciously there are certain gaps in, the way one responds to such behaviors or roles, that are filled in. A lot of it is just a um, like a behavioral, response to one's identity and how it asserts itself upon the world. Um, a lot of normal people who haven't like developed like a transdar, where they're like obsessively looking at images of people on the internet and trying to determine which characteristics of them are masculine to figure out whether or not they're trans, despite the fact that like so many cis women have similarly masculine, if not more masculine traits than what they're attempting to point out. If you're not one of those people who obsesses over these things, most likely due to your own sexual insecurity, um, generally like normal, nice people are accepting in a very genuine way. They're not doing it because they're afraid of some kind of persecution. I mean, most people wouldn't give a shit about that kind of thing. It's more so like it's just like, oh, yeah, if you want to be that, you want to be that. That's fine. And then they treat you as that because it's kind of hard not to when you see the clothes, the skin, the sound of the voice, the all of the whole package. It's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult not to assign those characteristics to someone exhibiting those characteristics, and as such, the way that you would respond to them. You would have to kind of make an active effort not to, um, uh, in the way that those people, insecure people, and prejudiced people that I mentioned would. And so, I guess basically the point that I'm arriving to here, as scatterbrained as all of this has been, is that I keep like reframing the main point like that. I should just finish the point that I'm making. I'm really rusty at this. It's been so long. Um, yeah, okay, so isolation. Like one of the big things that has made me more anxious, in social situations is doing boy mode, presenting as male. Because when you have gender dysphoria, like it's very hard to interact that way and to hear yourself referred to in that manner. And I find myself engaging with the world in a far more natural way when I am not presenting myself in that manner, regardless of whatever characteristics you may assign to me from the performative manner in which I am speaking in this YouTube video. But of course, um, you know, the way one speaks in a like piece of media is not necessarily going to be representative of who they actually are. That's one of the big barriers that was broken down when I did come out. A lot of people who had a parasocial relationship with me had to reckon with the fact that the person on the screen isn't necessarily the person in reality. And if you look at how many videos I said where I said I love being isolated and I never want to leave my room, and then you look at the person who desperately wants to leave their room, I think it's quite a fitting bow to put on that whole package.